It'll give everyone the full minute. So this will be the improvisational 1 minute where we smile at each other. And Jaresh did not follow the directions of smiling at each other. And there he goes. And we're going to smile at each other and wait till it turns to the 30 mark. And then once it's the 30 mark, we will be officially live and do our introductions. So people can join on the full minute and be happy. So I will mute that. That was secretly me spying on us. So that's why you heard the echo. We have already 2 people joined, but we want more to join. So we encourage joining. And then we will do the happy intro. Bree, are you feeling good?
I'm feeling great.
All right. Gavin, are you feeling good?
Always.
And finally, Jaresh, how you feeling?
Don't make fun of me, Dominic.
I'm not.
No, he's gonna. He totally
No,
is.
but he might, and I'm just telling you, don't do it.
Not gonna do it. Not gonna do it. All right, we're at the 12:30. So we are welcome everyone to Data Without Direction. Retail needs better questions, not more data pulls. We have our wonderful panel, and I'm going to go around. We'll start intro with Gavin. Start there, and we'll go around.
Sounds good. Thank you, Dom. Hi, everybody. My name is Gavin Hupp. I am a former VP of IT and data for United Parks and Resorts, but I've spent time working with PetSmart, Denny's, Super Shuttle, and I've had my own startups and my own consulting business in e-commerce as well. And I'm currently consulting and advising now, spending time with great clients and hanging out with Dominic and other folks from Retail Tech Media Nexus.
That's awesome. Bree, number 2.
All right. Hey, guys. I'm Bree Fowler. I'm at Dell Technologies, where I lead our global online function. I've had most of our experience design under my remit over the past little over 10 years. And now I'm more focused on our transformation programs, profit-driving programs, anything that is accelerating the business for Dell.com globally online. Prior to Dell, worked in private equity, did a little stint in retail and apparel, higher education, and just really loving being in the tech space and excited about this topic.
I love it. And Jaresh, take it home for us. A little intro.
I'm Girish Joshi. I work at LG Electronics. I'm responsible for the business, the e-commerce business at LG Electronics. So it's the full P&L. Before that, I did a very similar role at Samsung. And before that, I had a long career in consulting.
I love it. And to get this panel started, retail needs better questions, not more data pulls. The first question we're going to have, and I'm going to probably throw to Gavin and then go around. Why asking better questions is more valuable than asking more questions? Very philosophical question we have here. Gavin, you want to start us off?
It is, and it's kind of an obvious question that, you know, it's kind of a little ridiculous.
You need a better one?
Well, yeah, no, but I think it's a great segue to kind of go into this panel discussion where I think we're at this day and age now where there is so much data available. Data is infinite. You can measure anything and everything. However, your attention is finite. You are not able, and you should not chase after every single blip and get distracted with the noise that's out there. So it's critical that you have a prioritized and clear understanding of what questions you need to ask and why. And how does that question relate to or help uncover critical insights that can help you improve, really at the end of the day, your P&L. And so you need to understand from a deep understanding of your P&L. And I think there's a couple, obviously, things that lead into your P&L. I don't want to take up all of the time. I think we'll talk more about this, but data is infinite. You need to focus on what's really important and be able to drill down in a prioritized and strategic way, because you can get very distracted very quickly.
I love it. Bree, go for it.
All right. Well, I say I like to think about data as really a conversation starter, not the conclusion drawer. I think what we do is we try to draw conclusions out of the data that we have, and it's really not about the data we have, it's about what problem we're trying to solve. And so if we're framing up better questions, to me, I'm thinking we've got to have the curiosity to go, well, why? Like Gavin said, what are the questions around the customer intent, the friction points, decision making? We get so immersed in just what we have, but without the right questions, even the cleanest data sets will lead to really cluttered conclusions. So we've got to have that curiosity to go, well, why is it this way? Will this happen? Well, how? What do we point to? And I think you see that in just the rise of behavioral science becoming a core part of a lot of businesses. It certainly is here at Dell.
Jaresh, what's your take on it?
So I'll kind of stay at the philosophical level for now because I know we'll get into brass tacks later. But my early background was as a physicist. So when I think of data, I'm really thinking of my instrumentation. So I've got instruments that are measuring reality, and that's kind of given me something measurable. But when we talk about questions, we are not just talking about hypotheses. So that's one class of question. That typically you have a hypothesis and then you use your instruments to measure it. But I think there is a totally different class of question, which is like even before the hypothesis, which is that inherent curiosity you were getting at, Gavin. That I think that there's something out there, and having and having a hunch that sort of leads that scientific inquiry properly. It's incredibly valuable. We often find that the problem just unfolds, right? And we don't have to worry about how tricky the hypothesis is to prove or refining those instruments. That kind of insight is rare.
I love that. You mentioned going philosophy to brass tacks, and to start us there, how does the average retailer, brand person, executive watching this, how do they partner effectively with the data and IT teams to uncover what truly matters?
Are you asking me this question, Dominic?
I'm going to start with you. Yes, I am.
Okay.
And then I'm going to go Gavin and Bree. Yeah.
So in terms of brass tacks, so for me, a lot of the times when we're talking about data, we're starting with that instrumentation, right? So what I want in my instruments is I want them to be able to drive actions that I can take. And I know what those actions are beforehand, which help the data team design the right instruments. I can tell them this is the instrument. I don't know what reading I'm going to get, but I can tell you what the readings could possibly be. And this is what I'm going to do next. And then this is what the instrument needs to tell me happened. So it becomes part of that process. So the very first thing I do to interact with the data and IT teams is let them know what those actions are going to be. And I find that to be super helpful. Actually, that seems the most valuable thing. They want to know that what they produce is going to be used. The IT guys, man, they love their priority lists. And so I give them tickets and they get into that. And I think that they also really enjoy getting involved early. So there's particularly around the hypothesis and instrument building time, they love getting involved early. So that's what I do. I think they still hate my guts. But,
that's good. Gavin, take that from there.
I love that. Well, and I'll tell you, because of your background in physics, it's just physics. When you get a request, you have to move it through the workflow, work through the process. That's why we need prioritized lists of things. But no, those are the right things. It's identifying why and what actions you're going to take and how is this going to move the needle, and then working collaboratively and helping uncover, all right, what are the key dimensions? What are the metrics? And then on the IT and data side, they're obviously going to take that and identify, okay, is this data readily available? Do we have to do some engineering to move it in? Do we have to do some modeling to make it more useful? Do we have to create the right visualization? But when you give the technology teams, the data teams, your key actions that you're going to take or the behaviors that you're going to change, that helps uncover, all right, well, maybe this needs to be visualized in a run graph or a run chart. Maybe don't use columns. Column doesn't make sense in this particular scenario. Let's look at it, over a period of time so we can clearly identify the signal versus the noise. And then, okay, once you make that behavioral change, do you have the right instrumentation, the right tools, the right data to then measure and demonstrate incrementality or whatever it is the case that you're trying to measure against? And so they're going to hopefully ask a lot of questions, and so be prepared with a lot of those answers, and be prepared to collaborate on working on the solution from a converged perspective.
Bree, what's your take?
Well, I keep my IT friends close, right? I totally resonate with bring them in early, right? They want to be a part of the foundation. Everybody does. Any cross-functional partner, whether I'm working with our marketing partners, I'm working with our creative folks, our IT support. I want them to be part of the discovery process with us. We very much follow sort of the Silicon Valley product model of discovery and framing and, launch and iteration. And so that does help. It gives us a leg to stand on there. But I want them to come on board early and understand that customer pain point or the problem I'm trying to solve. I want to understand what their motivations and their KPIs are as well. What are they trying to deliver? What are they beholden by their leaders to go and deliver as well, so that we can put together a plan that reaches our main problem points, addresses customer concerns, but also sets them up for success in what they're trying to drive as well. They've got their own set of metrics and KPIs they're held accountable to, just like we are in delivering upside for the business, URM conversion, all that. And ideally, we can align everybody's goals around a common theme or a common problem. And for me, I want to make sure that everybody understands the why behind it, what we're trying to solve, and that we're not asking for something arbitrary because it came out of a big exec ask. I mean, don't get me wrong, that does happen, but by and large, I want that to be the exception, not the rule, where we hold hands and we go solve this together and figure out, not just how many people came into the site and converted, but why did the people that didn't abandon midway? Why did they bounce? Why did they leave? Did we not deliver on something they were looking for? And what was their purpose of visit? Was it to buy, or was it to learn and browse, right? And the PC business, the learn browse phase is a really important part of that customer journey. And we're not a small purchase. This is significant in many cases. So you've got to have success that's measured by what is that intent and what is the problem statement we're trying to solve. So for me, everything boils down to, we've got to address this together. We've got to have really clear expectations set, and then the data can speak to what that is. But if we're not all aligned on what are we trying to solve, it's really difficult to go and say, okay, well, how are we going to measure success? What's the data we're even going to consider, right? And so the analytics design of anything we're doing is so important. And it really all starts with having clear expectations and problem statements.
You inspired me for the next question here, which is the average retailer might not be technical. You might be dealing with a CMO or CEO or just a small shop that does not have the language to ask the right questions. Retail needs better questions. If you are not technical, how do you speak to that scary group of IT people to get that? I know this was a little bit of a curveball question, but who wants to take that one first?
Hey, I'll go. I don't find them scary at all. I think they're just wired different than me, right? At the end of the day, everybody is a consumer, right? We've all had shopping experiences. I know that we all come to the table with our marketplace of one beliefs and experiences. And I think it's really important to ground ourselves in that we all are consumers and customers in our own right. I mean, anybody who shops on Amazon thinks they know how e-commerce works these days, which, take it with a grain of salt. But I think it's important to recognize that we all are all customers at the end of the day. And now they might not be the customer we're addressing. I might not be the IT decision maker that I'm trying to address through an experience, but you recognize that just as much as I have expectations and wants and needs and preferences, so does that buyer. And so we've got to understand who that customer is. And I think establishing that commonality that we all have, that we all are customers in our own right. We all have had experiences that delight and experiences that, disgust, to put them up against each other. And, we know that we're loyal to those experiences that don't make us overthink, that are easy to transact, easy to accomplish what we've come to do. Whether I'm, buying a wireless speaker or tickets to SeaWorld or an AI PC, on Dell.com, right? It's all going to be a matter of, what do I need as a customer to make the best decision possible? And how are our experiences going to enable that? Well, we've got loads of customer verbatims, reviews, CSAT comments, behavioral analysis that we can see in terms of how people are pathing through the site, where they bail out, where they move forward, right? All of that should be able to arm us with what we need to go and solve these problems. But we've got to get really clear on what are the problems. And honestly, this is where I think AI is one of our best tools to take some of this data and get us into something that's actionable. What are the top 5 recurring themes that we see? And let's go after those pain points. And that's just such an incredibly powerful tool that we have that wasn't around, the way it is today several years ago when we were trying to solve these problems. So it's such a gift. I think we've got to embrace that as well.
Embrace it. Who wants to take that? Oh, Gavin, looks like.
Yeah, I think going on that same theme, where like the question was, okay, if you're not technical, if you don't really have a good data if you're not super savvy with data, it's fine. How can you partner with those that are? And I think it's really that partnership. And Bree, just coming with the why, and Girish, you had already mentioned this too, getting them involved early, coming with the why, what problems you're trying to solve, and trying to grow and to create kind of a more data culture, where you are using frameworks, you're using intuition, you're using acumen, but you have data as an assist. You're using data to help uncover insights. You're using data to measure how you're improving or where you're going. And so I think it's start with the why, get yourself up to speed as much as you can from a data perspective, but it's also partnering with the right people in your data and analytics or IT organization that have that technical background and experience, and elevate them, bring them up into the business side of things. So now you are kind of on equal playing field, so to say, and coach them on, okay, here's how we think about our business. Here's how the business operates. Here's the key terms and definitions that they have. And if they're in data, they should already know most of this stuff. But give them kind of a master class or crash course into a day in the life of how you operate and what's important to you, and part of them so they do the same, and so you can really complement each other. I think, Bree, as you're talking though too, AI can help empower non-technical people in ways that are really phenomenal and amazing. We don't need to go down this rabbit hole entirely, but it's it can be a superpower for many people. And so that's an area to explore as well.
Suresh, I'm curious.
Yeah,
I
I really like where you guys are taking this conversation. So I may have less insight in how to talk well to the IT folks, but I've got pretty good insight about how to talk well to the business folks. They may not be technical. I'm reasonably technical, but some of my counterparts aren't. But what they do know is competitive advantage. And often, what they have very clear ideas about how to exploit competitive advantage. That's why they're in the roles that they're in. But what they don't know is how to use data to enhance that. and so often, like, the questions is the best that they can do. And so trying to elicit from them exactly how they're thinking about the competitive advantage, and maybe this is some way that the data can work. Like you said, Gavin, a lot of it is about making them smarter. And Bree, your point around these are the 5 most important things. No matter how good anyone is at competitive advantage, they're going to enter into this space of I don't know. And when you're really in I don't know, and you really need discovery and exploration, we turn to our IT and data wizards, and we're like, tell me. And then we're back in data soup. And AI is one great way of then prioritizing back to them about what they might look at. When you're, I don't know is a place of great opportunity, and also a very easy place to get lost in the sauce, though. And in fact, I think that's kind of what our whole conversation here is about. What do we do when we're in that space?
Yeah, I think it's important to have that guardrail set up of, hey, here's what we're trying to solve. Here's why we're trying to solve it. But I also don't want to get so prescriptive that I'm telling IT, this is what I need you to go deliver. I want to arm them with the same insights that I have. And to the point about elevating those folks that are data savvy, we've got a wealth of knowledge in our behavioral science organization. I mean, PhD behavioral scientists, smart, right? Any instinct I
want
have.
to challenge that a little bit.
Yeah.
The issue is everyone is smart. Nobody gets hired if they're not smart. The issue, though, is around the accountability for the hypotheses and like the effort, right? So data science absolutely has its place, particularly in discovery, particularly where there are things we really don't understand, and we'd love to start to understand. But and there I want to empower them. But when they swan in to a problem that is largely understood, or has some, it can be a bit frustrating when they then also propose a solution that they then have no accountability for whether it's right or wrong. And this has happened countless times with me on people who want to tell me that their statistics are going to talk to me about how marketplaces and consumers behave. It can be true, but it's more often than not true. I mean, like, it just ends up not being the right answer.
Yeah, I think it also is, arming those folks with the same guardrails of what are we trying to solve? Because when I brought in, behavioral scientists, I'm looking for them to address a specific use case or a specific business case. I agree. If you brought somebody in and just said, hey, tell me what's wrong, tell me what I should go fix, right? They're going to start kind of grasping and give you that just sauce of, here's everything. Here's the world of what's possible. I don't ever want to be so prescriptive that I'm telling here IT, this is what I need you to build, and here's how I want to build it. And I want them to know why I want them to fix something. I want them to understand the mentality of the customer and what they're doing across that journey. But you do have to keep those guardrails in place, and you do have to keep everybody really maniacally focused on, hey, this is the goal. There's a lot of stuff we could talk about. There's a lot of stuff we get lost in. But if we're not really level set on what we're trying to accomplish, I think, and that goes back to asking the right questions, right? We've got to ask the questions that keep people focused on something actionable and deliverable, right? If we're going too broad, then that's on us. That's our own fault for not setting these folks up to be successful and to use that wealth of knowledge and really the power in how do I design a study, or how do I get to the conclusions that I'm trying to draw? I think that's the power that they bring. And that's where I personally will rely on that team to help me deliver something that answers the question I'm trying to solve for. But if I go too loose, I'm not setting them up for success either, right?
Yeah, I think that first of all, there's a certain basic dignity we should afford one another. That there's opportunity for inquiry everywhere, and I see it all the time where IT is just do what I say, and this is not what I'm trying to get at. So 100% agree with you. You see it in the reverse too, by the way. You see the business guys being like, hey, let me start doing some math today, Let's, what are our correlation variables? And I mean, I think there is room for everybody to, to inquire and be curious and grow, for sure.
While we're saying this, I'm realizing that you, Bree, and Jaresh, you're from companies based in tech.
Mhm.
And Gavin, you might have a technical knowledge, but you're a company, you came most recently from a company based in theme park. I mean, yes, there's technical aspects, but the team isn't. And I'm wondering what's you've seen both environments yourself, Gavin. When you're hearing this, what are you thinking in terms of that non-technical environment?
Yeah, so my whole background, all of the companies that I've worked for have been in consumer facing products and experiences, hospitality, travel, tourism. We don't build technologies as our product, but clearly in order to do what we do, we use data and technology every day to help improve the experience and drive the business forward. And so I think I've been very blessed and very fortunate to work with amazing business leaders, amazing marketers, amazing operators, because that is what they focus on. That is their core product. And again, the level of expertise, they understand their business. They have, they're razor sharp. They know their craft. And most of the people that I've worked with in the past too also understand where and how data plays an important role. Where things have kind of fallen down or fallen apart is at the strategic leadership level. They understand, okay, here's the strategy, here are our objectives, here are the things that are going to drive profit. Here drive revenue and cost. All right, what are the levers that drive our revenue? All right, well, you got to understand your customer. Here's our operating model, and here's where our costs come from. It's taking it from that level, at that higher level, but then breaking it down into the individual teams. And throughout each department is where I've seen kind of disconnects and struggles. And so from my perspective, it's having data leaders taking ownership and technology leaders and data leaders and business leaders taking ownership in creating a data culture, creating centers of excellence where it permeates throughout the entire organization at all levels, at the appropriate levels, at the appropriate amounts. But it's kind of cascading down and having also data flow back up in the appropriate way. That's been the gap. And so that's where I challenge everyone out there to create better partnerships, have more collaboration, come prepared with data, come prepared with the right question, more questions and the right questions, come prepared with data, and really as best as you can, try to understand your business process at the appropriate levels and the data. Understand the data supply chain. Where does the data come from? How are you accessing it? You don't need to know every step in between, but just that basic understanding of, okay, the data comes from this process and this system, and it ends up here. If you can do that, you're golden.
We have a question from Ryan. If you jump onto the comments here, you guys should see when brands go through an e-commerce platform migration, the focus is often in obvious KPIs like site speed and conversion rates. What are some other signal leaders should be watching? Who wants to take that question first?
I love this. We look a lot, at how we're evolving. Now we do use largely a homegrown platform. So I will say caveat there, when we're assessing a platform, there have been conversations of, hey, should we be using all homegrown or should we be supplementing with something else that allows us to run fast? And that point on agility, there's so many needs around the business. We're in a very complex space where the way that a customer paths through an e-com journey from a B2B IT decision maker perspective, that is a long lead time. Building a sales quote around AI servers. I talked to a rep the other day. He said he's been working on it for 4 months, and that's not that long for him, right? These are big conversations that happen over a length of time. So you've got folks coming into a site that they'll never transact on the site. our end goal for that customer, we obviously want to close a deal. We want to be able to be their AI factory for them. However, I've got to respect that there's a lot of engagement that's going to happen on the site that has nothing to do with actually selling and buying at that moment, right? And so when I look at evaluating platforms, evaluating tools, I want to be able to meet every purpose of visit. So if your purpose of visit is to research and understand who we are, what our ESG principles are, our circularity programs, because these are big, important decision-making factors at that level, then I want to be able to serve you that content. I want to empower my marketing teams to be able to put that content live quickly. They get burst funding coming in from big strategic partners of ours that say, hey, we want to go big with a launch. We want a co-branded site experience and a message. That's all about learn and engage and inspire. It doesn't need to transact. It's not the units revenue margin KPIs. So I've got to be able to enable my partners internally to move fast and with high quality. I've got to enable customers to be able to accomplish what they need in terms of finding the information, doing the research. And that may not be a units revenue margin conversation. It may not be a page load and core web vitals conversation, because they're willing to wait so that they can download the white papers and look through the ebooks and get into the wealth of technical documentation. So we just have to have a view of what's the purpose, what's the intent, back to expectations and clarity. I mean, clarity in that of what is a purpose, what are we trying to solve, and why. I think that's some of the most important things we can think about.
Anyone else have a take on that question?
So from an e-commerce, platform migration, that's usually a massive initiative. And when you're talking about agile or customer-centric, those aren't necessarily the same thing. If your business is agile, that means that you can iterate quickly, that you can move fast and respond to changes incrementally and iteratively, and value-adding changes, not just changing for changing's sake. So I think the best indicator are things like what Bria is mentioning is important engagement rates. Ultimately, though, that should lead, especially from an e-commerce perspective, that should lead to transactions and revenue. But you can measure that if this is maybe a little too technical on the IT side, but you can measure your agility with your velocity, how fast you can publish changes, how quickly you can get content out, what is the level of pain for your internal teams to produce new pages, new content, new integrations. That's one way to measure agility. There's other things, but then on the customer-centric side, I think it's similar that ultimately the more customer-centric you are, truly, you should be meeting their needs and accomplishing the job that they're trying to accomplish. But ultimately that should lead to revenue. Lots of other details in there, but I think those are kind of the highlights there.
Krish, let's wrap that home.
The thing that I look for is first of all that the metrics are being looked at. So that you're building a data-centric culture when people are actually using the stuff. But then the real magic is when you have some kind of report that's really geared to one business area, but people in other business areas are looking at it. Like, that's the magic. Now you know that people are sort of getting in and trusting that this signal is something that they can use. And that to me is where that agility starts coming from. And as far as customer centric goes, I think the truth is that outside of marketing, folks rarely think about customers at all. So the first measuring things that have to do with the customer is a great start. And then that it's not just the marketing department that's using that data, particularly sales, particularly supply chain. So if that's happening, you are doing great. You're doing great. And, we get there bit by bit. Fingers crossed. That's what I look for.
Speaking of doing great, we have one more question over here. What is the best practice to avoid looking at data and seeing what you want to see versus what the data is really telling you? Data can be slanted in various ways. Who wants to hit that one first?
I'm going to take that one.
Oh, he's ready. Just like hold me back.
I want to start with this. What's the difference? What's the difference between data and a guess? other than how much you trust your source. And the fact is that this stuff that we're calling data, we're calling it data because like the system is producing it, and so they're like numbers in the screen or something. But from my perspective, it is no more objective reality than my opinions in many ways. I mean, it has its value, it has its objectivity, but there is room for others to interpret it, and they may be interpreting it in a way I don't like. I may be able to logically challenge it, and I really, really disagree with it. But careful with that one. Careful with that one, because you know it may not be so that they're wrong.
Do either of you want to? I mean, that was a philosophical answer right there.
That was very philosophical. I think maybe just bring it down just for my brain to handle. It's like data is a representation of an event or a thing that happened, hopefully in reality, but it could just be something else. So Girish, you're right that you have to trust the data. But the other thing to think about is, you know, having meaning. This is kind of simple, but having meaningful comparisons. So looking at just one data point without context, you can interpret it in you know, whatever way that you want. Or if you compare it to something else, different, maybe an arbitrary period of time, it's like, oh, look, we're better. Okay, well, is that really meaningful? Do you have the right amount of data and the right amount of context to make the situation clear, or to show there's a trend, or to show that you are out of your normal range? I think you can, you know, pinpoint and you know, poke holes in that as well. But very basically, you know, make sure that you're measuring the right things, and you're comparing it to the right attributes, and that you're providing the right context. That should help alleviate the blatant and obvious manipulation in the data, or just trying to create an internal bias that only what you want to see.
That comparison and context is fundamentally subjective. And this is why you get into these issues. Like someone says, hey, I need a trend line of 4 weeks. So why isn't it 8 weeks? Why aren't we looking year over year? Well, it will always be a contentious thing. And there's some that suck, right? And you know, but it can be, I find that it is not useful to try to control the narrative with the data much. People are going to see things the way they want to see them. Let them see them in multiple ways, and then let the strength of the argument pair up with the data and go from there.
Yeah, I always welcome a difference of opinion, right? I want people to challenge what we're bringing out as a conclusion. The fact of the matter is, some data is subjective in nature. When I'm looking at ratings and reviews, when I'm looking at customer CSAT verbatims, that's entirely subjective. It's opinion based, right? It doesn't mean it's any less reliable inherently, nor is somebody's instincts, because they are instincts and not specifically factually proven and grounded, irrelevant, right? It's all important to consider. And so I think that's where you need that, you know, robust dialogue and a culture where you can challenge each other, because we've got to hold each other accountable. We've got to hold ourselves accountable for how we're using and hopefully not misusing data to tell a story, but also leave room for instinct, because there's a lot that we see. I mean, I've had countless experiences where we will test something, and in a test, in an AB multivariate test example, the recipe fails, but there's something instinctual about it that feels like it ought to work. And every once in a while, we'll take a bet and we'll say, you know what, we're going to launch this, and we'll do a pre-post analysis, and we'll see if there was something that we didn't catch. And several times we've seen, hey, our instincts were right. This was the right thing to do, or vice versa, right? A test wins, but then it fails miserably. And we can't be afraid to admit that and learn fast and roll back a change and say, hey, we did the best we could with what we had. And we made some big bets, and we did some things that might not work, but for the sake of the things that do work, we're going to take that risk, and we're going to do it eyes wide open.
I love it. I want to thank you all. This went so well. We all went over time officially, but It has given us a lot to think about. Bree, Gavin, Jaresh, thank you all so much for this. We'll probably revisit this on other technological concepts every so often. Thank you all.
Good.
Thanks, guys.
Al. Bye.